Here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Well, we now find out one of a couple of things. Either the guy sitting in the White House is a drug taker who is taking a very dangerous drug as a prophylactic, because he's not sick, as a preventative thing, hydroxychloroquine, or he's a complete liar. Now, we've established over the last 3 years that he's a liar. So I'm not buying he's the new hair club for men guy. Not only am I the president, I'm also a client. I don't think I'm buying it. And I'll tell you, I think it's really dangerous when talking about a drug that can cause some pretty serious side effects, including some mental disorders and making some mental problems even worse. So I'm really struggling with the president of the United States coming out to the public as a whole and to the international community as a whole saying, yeah, what's the big deal? I'm taking this possibly mind-altering drug that may or may not work, that the FDA has not approved for this use, but what the heck? I'm taking it anyway. Is no one else freaked out by this? And the thing is, my first thought when he said it, because I happened to watch him say it, was, first my mind immediately goes to all of the people who are now, because this idiot has told people, I'm taking it, why not? All of the people who are going to run to their doctor and go, the president's taking hydroxychloroquine, I need it. I have to have it. And there's going to be a massive run on it, because people are going to think that this is a way the president's protecting himself with it. It's got to be okay. So they're going to hog up the supply. Now, there's part of me that goes, well, some of those people will die, and some of those people will get really sick, and some of those people will really suffer, because I've heard from people who have taken this drug, it's nothing to toy with. And there's part of me that's okay with that. You know what? If you're stupid, maybe this is how we have to thin the herd. But again, I go back to those people who I know who need it, people who are suffering from lupus and other disease and other serious conditions that this drug helps to manage. It is a drug that takes a long time to get into your system and to be into work, from what I'm told. And to have a president in the most flippant way possible say, what's the big deal? I've been taking it a couple weeks now. Kind of leaves me in this weird, really bizarre spot. Because like I said, I am concerned about the people who need it. But then I happen to see, because look, I'm thinking, well, maybe it's just me. I happen to see Neil Cavuto, who I'm not a fan of. I happen to see Neil Cavuto, who, like I said, this Fox News host, who I'm not all that thrilled with. He came out immediately and said, quote, if you are in a risky population here and you are taking this as a preventative treatment to ward off the virus, or in the worst case scenario, you're doing it with the virus and you are in this vulnerable population, it will kill you. I cannot stress enough, this will kill you. He says this is a leap that should not be taken casually by those watching at home who are assuming, well, the president of the United States says it's okay. He says, I only make this not to make a political point here, but a life and death point. Be very, very careful. Now, for me, this was one of those moments, because you go, how low will some people go? Now, I've had very low opinions of the Fox News hosts for a very long time. We've now seen the depth of where it stops. We now see where the bottom for Neil Cavuto is, and that's in promoting a drug that he knows is going to cause harm and damage to people. So good on him. But here's the weird thing. We have a president who doesn't seem all that concerned about it. And we have a population that not all that concerned about it. And it has become a political issue. Look, if I've been told it was working and there are doctors who prescribe this to people who need it, then yeah, let's go that route. But as a matter of, what the heck? I can take it and then I can be as careless and as reckless as I want to be, because that's the message here. When he goes into these factories and doesn't wear a mask, when he goes out in these speaking engagements and doesn't protect himself or social distance, he's really saying, I'm protected. I got the hydroxychloroquine. I don't give a rat's behind about you. And this is the weird thing, because that's where this administration is. So it was this weird weekend. It was this weird week of not just that, but the blame game. I played this weird blame game for like a whole week of just craziness. Of Mike Pence, for instance, said that the CDC was using arcane procedures before the virus hit, and it made me think, well, whose fault then who are you blaming here? Are you blaming the CDC? Because after all, you were in charge for the last 3 years, and didn't you do an exercise on virus preparedness that said we weren't prepared? Wasn't it you? Wasn't it Donald Trump? Weren't you the guys in charge? And it's one of these things where, we're seeing this blame game going all over the place, where it's, I'm sure you've seen it. We've had whiplash over the last several days of Trump and his minions playing it's China. They lied. Guess what? They lie all the time. We should know that. And we should prepare for that. I'm sorry, China lying is not a reason for not reacting, because our intelligence community should know that, and so should he. It's the Democrats. I heard this one too. It's the Democrats for impeaching him. Oh, I'm sorry. We should not hold the president accountable, and he can't do two things at once. Again, showing how incompetent he is. It's Joe Biden because, well, everything's Joe Biden's fault. It's Barack Obama's fault, because Barack Obama only left him, what was it, a 90-page dossier on how to deal with this. But it was still Obama's fault, because absolutely everything was Obama's fault. And then it was the CDC's fault because, as I said, Pence said they're using these arcane methods. And then it was the WHO, the World Health Organization, because they get money from China and China lied. So it's their fault too. And then you went from that to really just crazy. It's old people's fault for being old. It's sick people's fault for being sick. It's the tests. Because if you do tests, you'll know people are sick and there'll be more cases. And the more cases you have, the more sick people you have who die from it. And if we didn't do any testing, they would just die and we wouldn't know why. It's crazy. I know, but that's the argument. My other favorites it's the hospitals, because that's where all the people are dying in the hospitals. It's the nursing homes' faults. It's the governors. I mean, you can go down the list. It's the janitors' fault because they weren't around to clean up after Trump. Or I guess, the old saying, it rolls downhill, janitors at the bottom to clean it up, I guess. But it was everybody. It was literally everybody but Trump. I got a fundraising email from a former GOP congressman and current congressional candidate, Paul Braun. You may remember him from Georgia. He wrote in the email, I believe the Chinese Communist Party, globalist groups like the United Nations and the World Health Organization, and incompetent and maybe even malevolent anti-Trump federal bureaucrats have a lot to answer for. Again, everybody but Trump. It's everybody else's fault. Everybody else. But the guy who's actually in charge. And it's one of these things where you go, whatever happened to the buck stops here? Did I miss something here? What happened? What happened to that? I mean, it's really quite bizarre to me. And all I heard from the Trumpkins during all of this is, of course, blame everybody else. And well, Donald Trump, right from the start, he wanted a travel ban, which, understand, I agreed with at the beginning. I said, we've got to lock the borders down. We do. We had to lock things down, keep the virus out. I was on board with that. The problem was, and I remember arguing this, he just did it to China. We now know it got here from Europe because why? If you didn't block everybody and you just went after the Chinese, which was xenophobic, people just go from China to Europe to the US. You didn't stop it. In fact, all you did was make it spread more. So again, it's another one of these moments where really poor leadership all the way down the line. And the only thing he did right was his tendency to seal us off from the rest of the world. And the thing that gets me is, I have people, just spouting these talking points at me that it's everybody else. And you go, but wait a second. He is the leader. He has control of all of the levers of power. Instead of spending a month and a half or 2 months dismissing and denying and calling it a hoax and doing all of the things that he was doing, maybe he should have been putting the message forward that this is serious, that we need to be doing the social distancing early. Maybe it wouldn't have spread as much. But we won't know because we didn't get that from him. So we're in this position now where we've had, over 90,000 people die. We're over 1.5 million sick, and it's going to get worse. They're saying by August we expect somewhere close to 150,000 dead. And 2 million plus infected. We're expecting this to expand. In fact, they're expecting 3,000 people to die every day through June. Things are going to explode because, hey, we got to get the economy back. So I've had a bunch of people go, well, what should we be doing? And my first thought was, what we shouldn't be doing, truthfully, we shouldn't on any level we shouldn't be doing this at all. Honestly and truthfully, we should not be doing this at all.
USA! 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 USA!
The weird thing about this is, none of these people actually probably belong to the gym. These are folks who decided they were going to go and celebrate a gym owner in New Jersey who decided it was time to reopen his business and time to to stick it to the man. And he was going to open his business and he's going to get people back into the gym because, it's his right. And, I'll tell you, the scary part in all of this is that they're out there chanting USA, USA at a time when, to be honest, we need people to actually be socially distancing. We need people to actually stay away from each other. We need people who are actually committed to stopping this thing instead of doing dumb stuff. We should be pushing for legislation to move forward on the idea that we keep people at home. We should be passing something like the Milton Friedman negative tax, a guaranteed minimum income so that people can stay home. So that people have the ability to stay home. How hard is that? And this is weighted in a very conservative idea, the Milton Friedman negative tax from the 1960s. And the very conservative Uncle Milty understood, in order for business to make profit, you need consumers. And this is an idea that has been around forever. It's something that we seriously need to be talking about. But we also need to do a bunch of other things. We need to shore up funding for our local governments and our state governments. We need to make sure that our frontline heroes, the essential workforce, gets hazard pay and we provide safe workplaces. None of this immunity for employers, but have actual rules and regulation, actual policy that's going to make people, do the right thing. Provide safe workplaces. We need to provide health insurance for people. April alone saw 27 million people lose their health insurance. We don't know what May has in store for us yet. There are so many things that we need to be doing that we're not, and this administration isn't pushing for, that of course we're going to end up back where we started from. Of course that people are going to want to get back to work so they can earn a paycheck. Of course they're going to push to save their business or what's left of it. Because this administration has done nothing, in my view, to really help them. There's been a little window dressing, but it's always the well-connected and the well-funded and those who can afford the lobbyists and the lawyers who know how to game the system that end up better off in the end. And you know who gets stuck? You and me. Which is why, again, we need something like the HEROES Act, only bigger. We need something that's going to make sure we take care of the folks at the bottom. Them and them alone at this moment. Just my thought. I'd love to hear yours. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Gonna take a quick break. Right back. Stick around.
There's nothing more American than workers standing up, and the union gives a voice to win. On the Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1933. That was the day President Franklin Delano Roosevelt signed the Tennessee Valley Authority Act. The act created the TVA as a federal corporation and was tasked to address the resource development of the region, one of the poorest in the nation. These included flood control and improved travel along the Tennessee River. It also meant improved forestry to address soil erosion and facilitation of agricultural production. Control of water resources required a series of dams designed to navigate the river and reduce flooding. Though Wilson Dam had been completed before the establishment of the TVA, the authority had embarked on the construction of 16 more dams. During the Depression, the TVA hired tens of thousands of workers for conservation, construction, and development. Historian Eric Loomis notes that though the TVA was one of the region's largest employers of black workers, the authority also maintained rigid lines of segregation in its workforce. He adds that though 14 AFL unions eventually worked on dam construction, the agency initially refused to recognize unions. Workers would have to wait until 1940 to sign first contracts in the anti-union South. Today, the authority is most well known for its supply of electricity to nearby communities. It is the nation's largest public power company and serves about 80,000 square miles in the southeastern United States. TVA capacity to generate electric power includes some 29 hydroelectric dams, 11 coal-fired power plants, 3 nuclear plants, and several combustion turbine installations. It also has several solar and wind installations. The authority produces more than 130 billion kilowatt hours of electricity each year. The TVA played a critical role in transforming the South by constructing infrastructure necessary for modernization and industrialization.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So the reality is, in all of this, what are we going to do, and will the Democrats be able to stand forward and fight back against the messaging that we know that's coming? It's all everybody else's fault. It's China. It's the Democrats' fault. It's go on. It's the hospitals. It's the sick people's fault. It's the WHO. It's CNN. It's the mainstream media. It's everyone but Donald Trump. And the Democrats don't seem to really know how to ball up their little digits and throw a good punch. And, I saw this tweet that grabbed my attention that pointed out in 2011, the idea of trading Social Security, Medicare, trading sequester to save those things was palatable because, hey, the Republicans had the House and 47 seats in the Senate. And today, those same people are saying, well, Nancy Pelosi doesn't quite have the leverage to move forward on something big and bold, something like the HERO Act or better, because the Democrats only control the House and 47 Senate seats, which seems kind of bizarre, but the logic is insane. Whereas Republicans, they're willing to throw punches, and really willing to obstruct and willing to hold the country hostage to get their pound of flesh. And here to share some thoughts on, can Democrats rise to this occasion? Can they possibly ball up their little digits and get in there and throw a good punch? That's why I've asked Jeff Hauser to come talk with us. Jeff is the executive director of the Revolving Door Project. Jeff, thanks for taking time for us.
Oh, anytime, Rick.
So, I'm looking at this comparison that you put out of 2011 and 2020, And I'm going, you got the establishment Democrats who are saying, well, we can't do too much because, well, we don't quite have the power. But they seem to always negotiate with themselves.
Yeah, and I want Democrats to have the courage of their convictions, and I also want them to project confidence. And honestly, even if they didn't have the courage of their convictions, even if they thought they were going to, fail in the end, you don't signal in advance that you're going to fail. Nancy Pelosi has described her bill as a messaging bill. Every member of the House leadership communications staff has signaled to every reporter in Washington, D.C., oh, we know this is just like a messaging bill. We know McConnell isn't going to move forward on this. And, one way to guarantee that Mitch McConnell doesn't act on your bill is to admit that it's implausible.
Right.
One way to make your messaging bill an ineffective message is to render it dull and irrelevant by describing it as a messaging bill. Every single person who works for the Democratic Party, who works for Nancy Pelosi or for, Minority Leader Schumer or what have you, who describes this bill as a messaging bill ought to be fired. It's a very simple, basic rule that you're not establishing a negotiating position if you make fun of your own position.
Absolutely. And the thing that gets me, Jeff, because I've said the same thing. What I've been saying is, look, you push your bill through and then you fight like hell to move it. And anybody who stands in your way, you run them over. This again goes back to the things I've been saying for years about the Democrats. And that's, they don't want to get into a fight. In fact, so much so that they won't even offer to hold your coat while you're in the fight.
Yes, Democrats think that they're going to get points for being reasonable, for being realistic, and for being consistent. And they're not actually even being consistent. They're not being reasonable, because what's reasonable is to acknowledge how much pain is there in this country and that the needs are just incredible. And there should be no trimming of our sails now. And what's been encouraging is the extent to which Vice President Biden seems to be recognizing that this is a moment to go big. And he is changing. He managed to win a primary as a centrist moderate, and he is shifting bigger and bolder in the general election. And why? Is it because he has changed, or has the world changed? I would argue that the world has changed, and that Biden has his eyes open to it, and Pelosi does not at the moment.
No, this is the moment. This is the moment that you have to be big and bold. In fact, I've had this conversation with a couple of conservatives over the last couple of days. I've been talking about Andrew Yang's rise to prominence with the freedom dividend and the universal basic income. And I said, look, this isn't a hippie liberal idea. This was Milton Friedman's idea from the 60s. This was a very simple idea that you give consumers money, they spend it, and businesses profit. It was a very conservative idea. So why aren't liberals and conservatives together on this? And no sooner do I say that I see the American Conservative Group has come out with a call for the exact same thing. So to me, this is one of those moments where if Democrats were really, really visionary and really thinking for the future, this is an opportunity to maybe pull some of those conservatives in their direction by talking about what they already want.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the bill, the CARES Act, the phase 3, the largest bill that's been passed heretofore, it's had some admirable intentions, but was incredibly ill-constructed. It was very complicated, and it's basically giving loans to small businesses, and then if the small businesses meet certain criteria, the loans will be forgiven, and it's like super clunky. And then you have an idea like a freedom dividend, or however you want to phrase it, but the government giving money to people. Rashida Tlaib even had a version where the Federal Reserve was involved. We could potentially start looking at issues like postal banking and other ways to get money for people who don't have checking accounts, because there are millions of Americans who don't have checking accounts. But the idea of just the government giving people money so that they can get necessities, that is much simpler, and it's going to be much more effective than the indirect, we're going to give a loan, you fill out some paperwork may or may not get uploaded. We may have a small business administration that has been, its funding has gone down year after year after year. It has no capabilities to help small businesses. The Democrats should get out of the business of being complicated, and they should be much more simple in their policy design. And giving money to people is one of those simple ideas that can actually help people.
No, I had the former Illinois Congressman Joe Walsh on the program. Somebody that probably, if you put us on the spectrum of policy, we would be at complete polar opposite ends. Except on this issue, where he said if he were in Congress still, he would be pushing for the government to pay between 90 and 100% of your lost wages. If the government is telling you you have to stay home to protect yourself, they should be paying you. And this is a very simple message. Stay home, we'll pay you. Stay home, protect you and your family. We will cover your costs. It is that important. We are in that moment in history. Stay the hell home. It's not that difficult.
Right. I mean, if you look at Europe, Boris Johnson is a right-wing leader in the United Kingdom. He's pretty horrible. He's very Trumpy. He and Trump are pals. Even he agrees with the notion of making sure people get, I believe in the United Kingdom, it's 80% of their salaries. Very lefty Denmark has that program in place. Germany, which their leading ruling coalition, sort of in the middle, they're doing it. Much of the rest of the world is doing some version of that sort of income replacement. So either get it through have the government just say, we are going to give all employers, we're going to pay this amount, no filing fees, no applications through banks, or just give money directly to Americans. Either way, those are more simple than what's going on, not much more expensive. And honestly, the money doesn't really matter. It's very weird for people to think about. The government is just different than you or I. They don't have finite capacity. They have the ability to print more money. That doesn't work if you have inflation. But America does not have inflation. In fact, right now we have deflation. Prices are tending to go down because, of course, there's a lot less demand. That makes sense. But in that condition, the American government could issue money and then just have the Federal Reserve cover it. There's no limit to what we can be doing and what we should be doing, because we want to make it as easy as possible for people to stay home.
Right. And this is why what I said from the very beginning, even before the first stimulus bill was passed or anything was passed, they were still in the discussion phase. I wanted to see Democrats go big and bold. This is an opportunity to completely change our economy and completely change the two America divides that we see, where you have the rich and the poor. This is an opportunity to possibly redo mortgages, a possibility to undo people with student loan debt or massive credit card debt. There's an opportunity to really rechange and reframe this country and benefit the working class for once.
Yeah, and in fact, I mean, what's going on right now is that the least incompetent part of the current administration, the least Trump part of the federal government, is the Federal Reserve. And so the Federal Reserve is having, from a technocratic perspective, the most competent response to this economic turmoil. And the problem is that the Federal Reserve, by its design, is much better at helping rich people stay rich than helping the rest of us. Now, helping rich people stay rich has some modest trickle-down effects now, but overall, by the virtue of the fact that the Federal Reserve is doing its job well, and our legislative response is not enough, we are making economic inequality, which was obviously catastrophically bad before, even worse now. And so it's just a real problem. And in fact, like the chairman of the Federal Reserve has told Congress, like, I need you guys to help middle class people and working class people and poor people. You need to be doing much more. I can't do it. But unfortunately, the Federal Reserve, the system he represents, is the least incompetent part of the federal government right now.
Yeah, that's scary. But here's the thing. I mean, I'm hearing people like Mark Cuban talking about, moving to a trickle-up economic system, which is basically what I've been saying. There shouldn't have been a dime going to corporate America. The $500 billion slush fund for corporate America should have been a giant way to boost the bottom of the economy, make sure that people can stay home. Because here's the thing, and this is just common sense. You give all of the working people the ability to stay home and continue their income and to continue to consume the things that they need, and employers will figure out how to get the profit out of them. You don't need to hand them profit. This just seems ridiculous that we keep doing this every time something happens with the economy, that we write these big checks to people who don't need it.
Yeah, I mean, we have a system that where rich people have decided that over the years, they do not believe in government. And so for so many decades, the institutions of the federal government, which were built up under Franklin Delano Roosevelt and the New Deal, and remained relatively strong into the 70s, there's been a sustained war on the federal government for the last 45 to 50 years. And you see that in something like the Center for Disease Control, which used to be the preeminent anti-disease institution in the entire world. And the United States did not have testing kits that worked. The World Health Organization, which Trump disparages, had kits that worked. We were offered them, we turned them down, and instead we had 6 weeks of no testing in the United States because of Donald Trump's xenophobia and because of the CDC's incompetence. It is insane that you would be a country that could be the worldwide leader in fighting against disease, and you can't even develop a test kit for several weeks. It is embarrassing. We as a country should be ashamed of this. We should be ashamed of the ideology which argues that it makes sense to nickel and dime the National Institutes of Health, Center for Disease Control, Food and Drug Administration. It's the same attitude we're taking to the Environmental Protection Agency or the Department of Labor. Our workplace safety is obviously a disaster, which is why we have the issues going on in, from meat packers to truckers to grocery stockers. We do not need to be this kind of country. This is an entire rebuke of a system that says government is unnecessary. Leave it all to the private enterprise. There's no private enterprise way to get out of a pandemic.
No, you're absolutely right. But, and to be fair, this isn't only Trump's fault. This isn't only Trump's doing. This is 40 years of Reaganomics. This is 40 years of starve the beast and drag it in the bathtub and drown it in the bathtub. This is 40 years of government's the problem and needs to be crushed. This is, years of during the Obama term of sequester and starving the government of resources. And while the funding didn't get cut to these organizations, the Trump administration most certainly wanted to cut funding to these organizations every year of their budgets. So for them to now say that, they were fully funded is kind of disingenuous.
For sure. I mean, and a lot of this actually, unfortunately, goes back to the Clinton-Gore years. Al Gore led on the Reinventing Government initiative, which sounded good, like, hey, let's try to figure out ways to make government work better. And there are always any large institution, every large corporation, every large nonprofit, the Catholic Church. If you're large, you're going to have errors and mistakes happen. It's inherent to any large institution. But the federal government was not worse than other large institutions. But what the Reinventing Government initiative under Clinton and Gore basically meant, hey, if we have a bunch of people making middle-class incomes for the federal government, why don't we outsource those jobs to businesses that'll spring up in Northern Virginia, where we can have executives who make 3 times as much money as anyone in the government managing government contracts, which cost 2 times as much money, but we'll reduce the number of people who work for the federal government because they're private contractors. So we'll consult out for business. And that's why Northern Virginia went from like a nicely, slightly upper middle class, but not like especially ritzy area, to the richest part of America. It's because of efforts under Clinton and Gore to consult out both the military industrial complex as well as just the rest of the federal government. It's just all done on consulting contracts right now. They make too much money and don't do as good a job as dedicated public employees.
No, and to highlight that, when Scott Walker went after the public sector workers in Wisconsin, I met a guy who had worked for the state of Wisconsin. And he was saying, look, Walker's cutting all this stuff. I'm retiring from my state job and I'm going to go work for this contractor that's doing my job. And I'm going to make twice as much money while collecting my pension. And I asked him, I go, don't you have a problem with that? He goes, yeah, it's horribly stupid, but I'm making good money doing it.
Yeah. And the irony of it is that, or not the irony, but part of the intent of this is that Scott Walker pays, the 2 times the cost of is doing it in-house with a union government official. He does the contractor, and the contractor gives back over like 5% of the overage as a campaign contribution. And so that's how you build out a political dynasty, is you get money back from you create a crony capitalism means that the people in government create these sort of feeders that are dependent on government largesse. The rich are the largest welfare recipients in America, and that's who fund campaigns on behalf of people will keep the system as broken as it is right now.
Which is why they get all the tax breaks and why during these moments they're the first bailed out. So last question I've got for you, because look, I think we both want to see the same thing, an energized political system that really gives a rat's behind about working people and working families. What's the way forward in this? I mean, I was a big Bernie Sanders supporter. I thought Sanders would be the right guy. I'm happy to see Biden is moving away from the center and moving a little bit further left. Is that going to take more pressure from voters? What do you see going forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're going to need to. Biden needs to see that the energy in the Democratic Party is on the left. I believe that is the case. I think he's just going to have to continue to see that. I think he's going to need to be clear-eyed about the popularity of a lot of views on the left. I think that right now, the thing that is most striking in all politics right now is that Pelosi is trimming her sails on popular issues, while at the same time, Trump and McConnell are insisting on the priority of liability bailouts for employers who do not take proper precautions for American workers. There's no way to pull that in which that's anything other than a popular opinion. And if you're Nancy Pelosi, why are you acknowledging you may sell out on employer liability? That is not a red line for you. It is incredible that Mitch McConnell will sit in the way of relief to the American people who so desperately need it, because he wants to make sure it's not that all employers who have employees who get sick are going to get sued. It's only if you fail to take proper precautions. Mitch McConnell is willing to risk the recovery of the United States of America to make sure there cannot be a lawsuit against an employer who gets their workers sick because they're cheap. That is having the courage of his convictions. His convictions are insane, but they are real. And I want Joe Biden to just spend some time thinking about whether or not running forthrightly against Mitch McConnell and Donald Trump and just saying what he believes and believing what he says and moving forward. How is that not obviously better politics than trying to trim your sails?
I'm right there with you. And it's a winning position. I mean, I often wonder how Republicans get away with their scorched earth ideology, but sadly they somehow do, and it's probably because Democrats don't push them on it. And we'll see how this plays out. But if I were Pelosi, I'd be hammering the hell out of that. We're going to give him a handful of employers who don't care about their employees immunity. No, that's the red line. But Jeff, I appreciate the time and the thoughts. Great stuff. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you. Stay safe.
Thanks so much, Jeff Hauser. He is the executive director of the Revolving Door Project. You want to check out their website, the revolvingdoorproject.org. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. This is The Rick Smith Show.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1972. That was the day that Maggie Kuhn stood before a group of reporters to tell them about her organization, the Gray Panthers. The idea for the group had started 2 years earlier. 65-year-old Maggie had received the unwelcome news that she was going to be forced to retire from her executive position with the United Presbyterian Church. Maggie was not ready to retire. Instead, she started to organize. This was during the era of the Vietnam War protests, and Maggie found allies with young people who also wanted to see changes in society. The original group developed to build connections between young and old. They called themselves the Consultation of Older and Younger Adults for Social Change. Later, they shifted their name to the catchier Gray Panthers. the Panthers adopted the motto Age and Youth in Action. In 1975, the Panthers held their first national convention in Chicago. 200 Panthers attended, representing 37 states. At the convention, the Panthers adopted a platform of issues. They included issues important to seniors, such as an end to mandatory retirement, better housing for the elderly, and expansions to rent control. But the platform also included other social justice issues, including support for the Equal Rights Amendment, a call for full employment, amnesty for Vietnam draft resistors, and even, after much debate, the legalization of marijuana. In the more than 40 years since their founding, the Gray Panthers have continued to advocate for a variety of issues. One key achievement was a court victory to make Medicare regulations more understandable to seniors, and they were years ahead of the nation by supporting single-payer health care for all. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So the virus has, well, it's kind of given rise to the John Edwards frame from 2004. If you remember the two Americas idea, you had the rich and the poor, or the wildly wealthy, and then all the rest of us. Those people who hide behind their gated walls and have their other society, their country clubs that no one's allowed to go to, and their private schools and all that. And then, of course, what's left for the rest of us. And a lot of people are saying, hey, we're better than that. And then along comes the virus. And the virus has now really broken things into the very simple, whether you live or die. Which side are you on? This is another one of those moments where, are you on the side of people who can afford to live, to stay home and wait this out? Or are you on the side of people who have to go out and have to struggle and work and, well, face the possibility that they could get sick? It's really, really scary. And then there's the other one. Are you on the side of logic and reason? Or are you on the side of those who are out throwing temper tantrums at the post office or out screaming USA in front of a gym that they've probably never gone in? I'm here to share some thoughts on where we are and, well, the insanity we see. I've asked our good friend Crony Capitalism to come talk with us. Crony is the treasurer of the DNC's Black Caucus. Crony, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, brother, thanks for having me on again.
So, am I off here? I mean, because I see this very simply. I see it very clearly. You've got really two groups of people. The people who are home, quiet, trying to figure out how to make it through this. And then those who are out just throwing a public hissy fit because they can't get their hair done or their roots done or their nails done.
No, I think that's accurate, but it's a sad commentary on the condition of America right now. It's really unfortunate that you've got this virus that's turned into a political football, something that people are using against each other rather than simply saying, what's the best thing for my family, for my neighborhood, my community, for our state, right? To do the right thing so that we can really put this behind us. I mean, we thought in the beginning of this that it would be that kind of sentiment that we had after 9/11, where we all did come together. It really did feel back then that we were all truly one group of people, but now it's not the same thing. And I think a lot of that happens as a result of Donald Trump and his inability to not only be reasonable, but simply be honest.
No, I absolutely agree. And I would argue that the difference was, Curry, is that from the beginning, Trump didn't understand the gravity of the moment, wasn't able to comprehend how big of a moment he was standing in front of. There was no heaping pile of ash. There was no one moment that made him say, I got to rise to this challenge. And for weeks he put it off and dismissed it and clung to the precious economy. And, well, here we are.
Right. And again, it's really unfortunate. There are people that are really, really struggling right now. Families that are struggling to put food on the table, not knowing when they're going to be able to go back to work, if they can go back to work, if they have a job to go back to or a business that they can go back to. I mean, you have families who've lost loved ones. And for the president to be so flippant about death, that, he's unable to lead, right? I mean, you don't have him saying, look, calm down. stop going out and bringing your swastika signs or your Confederate flags and your guns to these rallies and acting up like that. I understand you are frustrated and all these things, but that's not going to help us get back to work faster. That's not what our society, our communities need. We don't need that kind of anger and hate towards each other right now. We need a sense of togetherness. He lacks the ability to do something like that, but he had the chance to bring folks together, at least bring folks that support him undyingly so, to bring them to the table and say, hey, at least for right now, let's not act like that. Let's act like we all actually care about each other. And he failed to do that.
Yeah, he absolutely failed to do that. And again, this is another one of those moments. I don't know if you saw President Obama's speeches over the weekend, the commencement speeches that he gave. As I watched those, I kind of, because look, I had my problems with President Obama. There were a lot of things that I wasn't happy with, but I never questioned his leadership ability in those moments that we needed a calming voice, in that moment that you needed someone to try and bring us together. And, watching him give those commencement speeches kind of brought me back to that, to where, I really want a sane, rational leader again.
Okay. Oh, you froze for a second. Sorry about that. In listening to his commencement speech on Saturday, I am reminded of all of the other speeches that he gave after a mass shooting, after the mass shooting in Charleston, right? When he gave the speech at the funerals, in the way that he was able to talk to our collective pain and help us kind of get through those moments, even if it was like just a brief moment that he was able to help us soothe for just a second. You got a guy who's tweeting things like loser, right? Like he did today about Mitt Romney. Donald Trump just simply does not have the ability to speak to our pain, to ask us to be more compassionate and to be more empathetic. He simply just likes fighting. Because he doesn't honestly care about much. He just likes to fight. That's it.
Well, he likes the chaos, and that's really what it is. And we knew that from the beginning, that he was going to lead in a fashion that was chaotic, that there would be lots of tension and people fighting each other, and that's his style, and it's not working.
No, it's not. But if you remember, there were people who were saying once he becomes president, he's going to change. That clearly didn't happen. But what did happen is America changed. I think that is the true downside to his presidency, is how much he's infected our country to the point where it's going to take us a very long time and a lot of hard work to recover from this, not just from the policy damage, but from the societal damage that he has caused by the way we interact with each other. The kind of behavior that he inspires and encourages is going to carry on beyond when he loses in November, to the point where those of us who are on this side are going to have to work even harder and be more empathetic and more willing to see past the nonsense, to say, hey, you know what? You really don't have to act like that.
Yeah, I look at some of these videos, and you do a pretty good job of posting all of the craziness that's going on in post offices and malls and in restaurants across the country. And it just amazes me as I'm watching these people act the fool, where I'm going, where's your mother to smack you? Because none of us, I don't care who you are, I don't think anyone's mother would allow you to behave in such a way. I know my mother would have smacked me every which way but sideways if I acted or behaved in any of the ways that these folks who feel very entitled to be able to be as obnoxious and as rude and as condescending as these people that you see on these videos are.
Right, so there's a difference between those who are struggling and are in need and just simply are desperate, right? They're desperate for a hand, like to help me to get through this. They're starving. They're really struggling. That's different than being entitled, right? To simply say, I'm not going to let you prevent me from coming in your grocery store without a mask, despite the fact that the store has the right to say whatever they want like that. If you no shirt, no shoes, no service. I mean, you can say things like that, but apparently you can't tell people not to that they can't come in without wearing a mask, without someone being as insulting as the woman was on the video. And want to do that to really, get down on someone, but it's more of like, let's examine how we are behaving and look at, this is something that a woman did wrong. How about instead of, continuing those kinds of behaviors, let's correct it and stop acting like that. Stop not just acting like that, like where you were just that arrogant and that entitled. Let's stop treating people like that. I mean, you had the guy who was in front of the store as polite as you could possibly ask a person to be, and then is dancing to Michael Jackson while cleaning the carts. You couldn't ask for better customer service. He is literally just trying to do his job.
Yep.
In fact, he says it in the video. He's glad he's got a job because his other job was as a bartender, right? He just wants to work. He just wants to get that paycheck to provide for himself. And here you got this lady berating him, acting like, the world is against her and we owe her something. We got to stop that.
Yeah, and what it's going to take is, it's going to take people to put them in their place. I think someone has to tell this woman, this is not proper behavior. This is wrong. And on some certain level, isn't that a societal thing to where, when I was a kid, I don't know, the rest of society kind of held everybody in check. The crazy people got ostracized. The people who were a problem got set aside, and we kind of held the glue together. We're just in this weird spot.
Right. And I think that is, again, emblematic of how Donald Trump has infected this country, where racists and the homophobia and the misogynists were really shunned to the corner in the periphery of society. They didn't have a mainstream voice. They didn't have a seat at the table, nor should they, right? But now he's energized these folks to make them believe that they are these forgotten people. Like, well, you should be forgotten. Your racism is not welcome here. And we need to get back to a place in our society where we're strong enough to say that, but the people who hold those beliefs need to understand that they are flat out wrong. And you know what? It's okay to be wrong sometimes, right? You don't have to look at Black folks as the other, as evil, as monsters, as someone that is taking something from you, or immigrants who are here to take your jobs. That's not real. But they need to be able to see that. And I also think, though, while they need to be shown where they're wrong, it is also incumbent upon us to be bigger people with bigger hearts to reach out to folks and say, hey, you may not have met a Black person before. Let me shake your hand. How about you meet me as a person rather than watching Fox News and listen to what they say about people who look like me?
So you think that's possible? You think that they're able to be saved? Because I'll tell you, I'm of the mindset that anybody who's out there with a flag chanting USA in front of a gym just because it's opening, that they're beyond saving. They're fives. Let them go. You got to cut them from the island. But you're saying that you think you can possibly save them.
I believe in redemption, man. I don't want to write anybody off. I mean, if you consider back in around 2012, there was a mass shooting here at the Oak Creek Sikh Temple where a white supremacist thought the parishioners at this temple were Muslim. And he went and shot and killed 6 of them. One of the sons from that temple befriended a white supremacist, and now not only are they good friends, they wrote a book together. They go across the country talking about white supremacy and how they need to end it without people reaching out to each other, right? And trying to reach across these divides to make a difference. I don't think we can make those kind of deep-seated types of changes that I think our country, our society is desperately in need of. I can't say that I'm willing to write off folks because they are abhorrently ignorant or they say some awful things. Maybe they just need to meet someone, maybe like me or Cory Booker or Barack Obama for that matter. I don't know. But to just simply say, I'm not going to talk to someone because they might say something horrible, I don't believe in that. I'm willing to talk to anybody. If I have a chance to make a difference in someone's life, I absolutely will take that opportunity.
You're a better man than I am, because I've been of the mindset, look, it's time to just let them go. We've got too much work to do and too much cleaning up to do to waste time that I fear would just be wasted. But hey, this is where we differ a little bit. But Crony, I appreciate the time, the good words. I wish you the best. I hope you come back and talk to us again.
I'll be happy to come on anytime, brother. I appreciate it.
Good stuff. Our good friend Curry Pennebaker. Love to hear your thoughts. Are they able to be saved? Would you try? You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Let me know what you think. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. This is The Rick Smith Show.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1979. That was the day an Oklahoma City jury found in favor of the estate of Karen Silkwood. Karen worked as a lab tech at the Cimarron nuclear plant operated by the Kerr-McGee Corporation. Karen joined the Oil, Chemical, and Atomic Workers International Union during a 1972 strike at the plant. She walked the picket line, returning to work once the strike was ended. Karen remained very concerned about safety standards in the plant. So much so that she decided to serve on the union's bargaining team. She also agreed to secretly collect documentation of the plant's negligence. In November, she did a routine self-check and found she had higher than normal levels of plutonium, an incredibly deadly substance in her body. Further investigation found her home was contaminated as well. She became convinced that her employer was attempting to poison her. Kerr-McGee accused Karen of poisoning herself to put nuclear companies in a bad light. Despite her fears, Karen pressed on with her investigation. She was on her way to meet with a union representative and a reporter from the New York Times when she died in a mysterious car accident. She was allegedly carrying a manila folder of documents related to her investigation. The documents were never found. Evidence showed that she was likely forced off the road by another vehicle. The jury found the company at fault for the plutonium contamination, awarding more than $10.5 million in damages. The company fought the verdict and eventually settled with the family for $1.38 million. In 1983, Meryl Streep starred in a movie, Silkwood, telling the story of this incredible woman who gave her life fighting for worker safety. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So here's one of those scary things that, again, we have a government agency that is in charge of keeping workers safe, and yet they're not. If you look at the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA, which is under the Department of Labor, and Eugene Scalia, their secretary, they have only investigated 7% of all of the COVID-19 related complaints. So whenever those meatpacking plants were complaining, hey, there are people getting sick here, and they're not doing anything to help us. In those nursing facilities where people were complaining to OSHA saying, hey, they're not giving us the proper protective gear. They're not protecting we the workers. When those people in the grocery stores and in the supermarkets and in the restaurants were saying, hey, we need help, before they closed everything down. The people who are working in warehouses and trucking companies who have been saying, hey, we need some protection here. Only 7% of the claims were investigated. And here's the worst part about it. In those 7% of the claims that they did bother to investigate, not one citation for doing anything wrong. Not one. And you wonder why this week the AFL-CIO, said that they're filing a lawsuit against OSHA because they haven't issued emergency temporary standards that would protect U.S. workers. They haven't done their jobs. Because remember, OSHA is supposed to be the arm that protects all workers. Now, I say this all the time. If you're a working person in this country, a union card you should have in your wallet. There's no question about it. And especially now, A union card should be the first thing in your wallet, because that's going to give you the ability to have some say on the job. And we've had some union leaders on the program over the last couple of weeks that have talked about the work that their unions have done to help keep their members and the employees safe in this time. Sad reality is the vast majority of workers in this country don't have the ability to say anything in the workplace. They don't have the ability to stand up for themselves. They don't have the ability to say no. They're at will. Without a contract, you're at will. Without a contract, there's the door, is the response that you will get. So good on the AFL-CIO for filing suit, but more importantly, this is why you need to have elected leaders who demand better. And the person who sits in that White House, who puts that person in that secretary seat at the Department of Labor, better be someone who actually cares about workers. So for all the talk Trump has about, how much he cares about working people, the actions of the agencies that he's in charge of, I think speak much more loudly than the handful of words that come out of his mouth. Just my thought. Scary stuff.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
Our society has coined expressions like philanthropist to encourage and hail people's charitable spirit. Look on the flip side of that shiny coin of generosity, however, and you'll find that its base substance is societal selfishness. After all, the need for charity only exists because we're tolerating intentional injustices and widespread inequality created by power elites. A society as supremely wealthy as ours ought not be relegating needy families and essential components of the common good to the whims of a few rich philanthropists. Yes, corporate and individual donations can help at the margins, but they don't fix anything. Thus, food banks, health clinics, etc. must constantly scrounge for more charity, while big donors have their charitable spirit subsidized with tax breaks that siphon money from our public treasury. Especially offensive to me is the common grandiose assertion by fat cat donors that charity is their way of, quote, giving back to society. Hello? If they can give so much, it's probably because they've been taking too much. As business columnist Andrew Ross Sorkin points out, all too often, charitable gifts are used to make up for the failure of companies to pay people a living wage and treat their workers with dignity. It's not just the unemployed who rely on food banks, but janitors, nannies, Uber drivers, checkout clerks, and others who work full-time but are so poorly paid they can't make ends meet. That's not a sad charity case, but a matter of criminal exploitation by wealthy elites. And the charitable thing to do is to outlaw it and require a living wage for all. This is Jim Hightower saying, as Sorkin puts it, the aim should be to create a society where we don't need places like food banks. We should be trying to put the food banks out of business.
What do the corporate powers from Wall Street to Walmart have in common? They hate the Hightower Lowdown. You can see why at www.hightowerlowdown.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So some encouraging polling numbers coming out, because you may remember back in 2016, Donald Trump won the over 65 crowd by 13.3% over Hillary Clinton. And as of this moment, the polling I'm seeing shows him losing by a point to Joe Biden. That is a monumental shift. And, as I was thinking about it, I was going, who could have possibly imagined, who could have known from a messaging standpoint that, the 2016 chant of lock her up would be harmed by the 2020 chant of let them die. Who would have thought that could have been damaging? I don't know, and especially since the people who are dying overwhelmingly are the people who probably would have voted for Trump. probably not the greatest winning combination. Just a thought. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on, well, where we are today. I've asked back our good friend Propane Jane. Jane, thanks for taking time for us.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me back.
So who would have thought, that let them die wasn't a great message?
I think at least me and you thought it. We probably talked about it a lot too.
No, I mean, have you got the kind of whiplash over the weekend that we saw over the blame game?
Yeah.
It's China, it's the Democrats, it's Obama, it's Joe Biden, it's the janitor, it's sick people's fault. It's and especially minorities. I mean, were you surprised that the guy who's the head of Health and Human Services actually came out and said, well, those minorities, they've got a lot of health problems?
No, I'm not surprised.
I'm surprised he said it. I mean, it's one thing to think it, but I'm kind of shocked that he came out and said it.
Well, what would stop him? I mean, at this point, Trump is their example. I mean, he's doing whatever the F he wants to do, so they're going to follow suit, and they know that they're not going to be in trouble for it. I mean, what's going to happen to them as a result of them doing that? Okay, yes, maybe people will, be outraged and get upset about it, but that's it. I mean, that's the most that's going to happen. This man was impeached. He's impeached forever, and the Republican Party refused to remove him. So he's there.
Yeah. And my fear is that, there's a sizable number in this country who don't want to see him removed now after all of these weeks of incompetence. And today, did you see today's debacle? This whole, I've been taking hydroxychloroquine, but taking it for weeks.
But we knew he was. We knew that he was doing something that had convinced him that he was even more invincible than he already thought he was. We knew that because he's not wearing a mask, he's not following any protocols, he's, looking at people actually around him within the White House getting it, and still not wearing a mask or doing any of the precautions that his own people at the CDC and elsewhere are telling people to do.
The weird thing is I looked up the side effects of this hydroxychloroquine.
It's not good, man.
It's not good. It's not good. Here's a 70-some-year-old guy. One of the side effects is fast pounding, uneven heartbeat.
Yes.
Another one is feeling others are watching you or controlling your behavior.
Yes.
Thoughts that others can hear your thoughts. Feeling, seeing, or hearing things that are not there. Are these things that we want in a guy, even in the same state as the nuclear codes?
No, it is not, and we definitely don't want it in a guy who already had all that stuff before he started taking hydroxychloroquine. That's the problem. I mean, everything this man does from the moment he wakes up to the moment he goes to bed at night is the worst possible thing for him to do if the goal is for him to stay alive. Now, if your goal is for him to just keel over and die one day, then sure, he's doing all the right things to make such a thing happen. I'm not saying that that's going to happen. I'm just saying that he's increasing his risk factors, by multiple folds, each thing he adds on. So if we're running down the list, again, this is a man that we know publicly. I'm not, I haven't looked at his chart. Again, the Goldwater police are not going to come and knock at my door because what I'm about to say, all of this is public knowledge at this point because this man is masquerading as the president of the United States. So we know everything about him now.
Yeah,
okay?
but here's the
public
thing.
knowledge.
As he says this, and I happened to be watching as he was speaking with the restaurant owners, and they were taking questions afterwards. I'm going, isn't it the doctor's job to do no harm? Why would you give someone who's 70 plus years old a really serious drug as a prophylactic? It doesn't make any sense to me. But here again, I'm not a doctor, and I don't even play one on the radio or TV.
Right. Yeah.
But it just seems like a bit of common sense after I looked up the side effects and what it does to go, do you really want to give this? Would any sensible doctor go, oh yeah, what the hell, take it. What do you got to lose?
Well, it's like Colonel Jessup said in A Few Good Men. Okay? They're following orders.
Yeah.
You can't handle the truth, man. Ultimately, at the end of the day, this guy, again, is the fake president of the United States. So whatever he's telling people to do, no matter how dangerous it is, no matter how nonsensical and idiotic it is, they are feeling obligated to do it, and many of them are going ahead and doing it. Okay, now certainly there are people who are, resigning, and we've certainly seen tons of people be fired. I mean, the list, Rachel Maddow's list is so long at this point, you can't even keep track. So clearly there are people who fall out of the order, and they fall out of being able to follow him down this path. But, again, speaking as a physician, what we've seen happen in the history that we have for him is that starting all the way back at the Coco Cabana guy with the long hair, and they really didn't look, very credible. And his written statement also didn't sound or read very credibly either if you're actually a medical professional. But again, it was enough to pass the muster for the mainstream media and the political world, because they just want to hear that, oh, okay, he's fine. A doctor says he's fine, so he must be fine, because why would a doctor lie about something like that? But again, we don't know the hold that Donald Trump as a civilian has over this individual, or what sort of barter system they had already worked out in their doctor-patient relationship, where this doctor was willing to not put accurate statements into his medical record and be rewarded with, maybe extra payments or who knows what. I mean, just the whatever, gravitas he gets to feel internally of, I'm treating Donald Trump and I'm so super special because I'm his main man.
No, he gets to go to the porn star parties. That's what
exactly.
That's the payoff.
Exactly. I mean, we can all think of the reasons,
sure,
how the barter system works. And again, that extended to Ronnie Jackson. Once he got to the White House, this individual was writing him scripts for Ambien. We know they admitted that. We also know that his weight was his height and his weight were fabricated just based on the naked eye. Okay? So we know that even that doctor, who again is disgraced now, who no longer serves in that role because he's shady and has his own ethics issues.
And now is running for Congress.
Well, of course he is, because that's where you go when you have ethics issues and are shady.
Of course you do.
Of course you do. I mean, you can win office as a Republican, and you can become the fake president of the United States with help from Putin, and you can get away with it. So there's nothing stopping any of these people, anyone from Ronnie Jackson to these doctors to just average Joe Blow on the street, from going in and, berating people at restaurants because they don't feel like they want to wear a mask. I mean, all of this is connected. It's all connected to Trump just brazenly, being a very sick and dangerous individual, but getting away with it because people won't hold him accountable. People are afraid to mention the things that are scary, the things that are problematic. They're worried about getting sued. They're worried that he's going to sick the dogs on them like he has always done. And so he's just getting away with murder every week.
Yeah. It was interesting today. He said he knows about frivolous lawsuits. And I'm like, yeah, you're the guy who starts them.
Exactly. He does. That's an honest statement. They're being very honest right now.
Yeah, and I was like, wow, maybe this drug is making him, maybe the drug is making him honest. Maybe it's like truth serum. But here's the thing. I still don't believe he's taking it. I don't buy it. I got to think that there's part of me that goes, he's either making it up completely, it's total BS, he's not taking it, or the doctor's just giving him like a sugar pill.
It could be all of the above, and that's why this is such a scary moment, because either way, we know that he's not doing what he's supposed to be doing as the leader of the quote-unquote free world. He's not, as you were just talking about in the segment before this one, he is not behaving the way he needs to behave, and, a majority of the population seems to understand that. Now, certainly a majority of Republicans are A-okay with that. But again, I think that there's any possibility. It could be that he's taken something. It could be that he's not taking something. It could be that he's just getting more cognitively impaired and doesn't remember what he's doing from one day to the next either way.
All of the above scary
All of
stuff.
the above, and that's what makes it scary as hell and dangerous.
Yeah, but here's the thing. We talked about, so many people getting fired. At
Yeah.
this point, don't you think getting fired from this administration is kind of like a gold star on your resume?
Yes,
I mean,
it's a blessing in disguise.
Don't you want to get fired? At this point, aren't you working to get fired?
Yeah, you're working to get fired, and you're working to maybe be like a Scaramucci and be able to leverage this into a book deal. I mean, if you're somebody who was, personality-oriented to where you could be in Trump's social circle for any extended amount of time before he became this person that's occupying the White House, you already have a certain element in just your way of being interpersonally that you can be manipulative and you can be conniving and you have sociopathic traits that, again, may not actually debilitate you to where it holds you back in life, but it may be something that works in your favor. I mean, we know this about politicians. Statistically, we know this about business people. We know this about people who rise to a certain level of success, that they actually are more likely to have these narcissistic traits and these sociopathic traits because, again, even though we call it antisocial, even though we say somebody is a sociopath or a psychopath, those terms are very misleading because it makes you think that you automatically are going to reject this person because they're so distasteful and so disgusting. A lot of times, these people can be extremely charming and charismatic and effervescent. And so if you can tweak it and if you can use it to your advantage, for instance, somebody like Bill Clinton, this is a man who's a ladies' man. I mean, he's that classic sort of, caricature of like a philanderer, but he mixed it together well enough that he was able to get the politics right to where even though he did some of these things that are like morally, ethically questionable, his approval ratings always remained high because he was successful. He got the job done. The economy was roaring along. He was able to move across the aisle. He was able to get bipartisan things passed. And so he was able to actually govern the country in a way that we got America into a surplus. We don't talk about that enough, that we had a surplus. And so, yes, he did some bad deeds, but yes, our society is such that we like a bad boy, kind of. I mean, that's the thing about America. We like this guy who can be kind of sleazy and use it to his advantage. The mafia lore, the folklore of that, is something that is very appealing to us. That gangster code and that thug life. I mean, we like that, but we don't like it when it's actually killing us, and
right.
that's where it goes too far, And if you get to a point where you're actually killing people and robbing and stealing from them and lying to them maliciously, with malicious intent, then that's where you've crossed the line, and you start to get, like you're saying, elderly people who don't typically vote Democratic and who've been in this Republican, stranglehold for so long, starting to go, now, wait a minute, my friends are dying. I could die.
Yep.
No,
but wasn't that the argument?
That's where it flipped.
Right, but wasn't that the argument that what Chris, I can never say his name right, Saliza, isn't that the argument he was making, that, you may not like Donald Trump, but his supporters love him because, he may be vile and he may be all of those things that James Wood said he is, that, most people would view as an insult.
Right.
His supporters view it as something very positive, and he gets the things that they want done.
Right.
Now, he took a beating for it today, but I don't think he was wrong.
No, I don't think he's wrong. I mean, it's possible for, and, this is very, shrink jargon, so I apologize for that, but it is possible for multiple things to be true at the same time.
Right.
And so ultimately, yes, that is what his fans, his stands, his sycophants, his enablers love most about him. They like that about him. Again, I always say this, Ted Bundy did not run out of victims. He just ultimately got caught. If he didn't get caught, he would have kept on killing women because he was so charming, he was so effective, that even once he was, went to trial and was locked up, I mean, there were women lining up to be his wife.
What is
and
wrong
that
with
same
people?
is true for Charles Manson.
Oh my God! What is you hear those things and you go, What the hell is wrong with people? I mean, I see these, I saw the video that was going around today of all of these nitwits out in front of this gym that, none of them were members of. And, none of them were going to a gym, but they were cheering the defiance, man.
Oh, they love it. They love it. They love the anarchy. They love the nihilism. They love the fatalism. There's a burn it all down crowd in the world.
No, I knew most of them who, most of the ones I knew voted for Trump because that's what they wanted.
Yeah, they want
that. So he's
that.
given them, we're living through what they wanted. Congratulations. Nice job. But here's the thing. This weekend gave me some hope, though.
Oh, good.
I got to see, President Obama came and gave what I thought was a very good
He did. He
speech,
knocked it out of the park.
Given the situation that we're in, which outside of going, I miss those moments when a president, can speak and speak to everybody and try and pull people together.
Right.
I also love the fact that it drove Trump absolutely mind-boggling.
Oh, me too. I mean, it's awesome. It's got like multiple cherries on top. Sunday fun, Sunday fun day.
And his ratings were much higher, which again sent Trump into an absolute tizzy.
Right. Exactly. Because it's a direct confrontation of the delusions and the fantasies and the grandeur, right? I mean, because there's a whole wall of cognitive dissonance and propaganda that these people have, boxed themselves into to feel warm and safe at night. It's like a security blanket. And so moments like that Obama speech and even moments like, him just being criticized and the coronavirus being so terrible and terrifying to people, even in that fear and that terror, it's like we were saying last week, we still have a nostalgia for times that weren't that long ago where we did have competent leaders that got us through very stressful times and actually, got us to a point where we were able to excel and build on and make progress. And so that's important right now.
No, absolutely. And during the Obama years, I was as hard on him as anybody.
Yeah.
Not because I didn't like him, but because I had much better hopes for him.
Right.
I wanted much more. But I looked at that guy and I'm going, man.
It's like, what are we doing right now? What are we even doing with ourselves? We look terrible.
Absolutely. I go, this is the guy I want to see in this moment, which then got me to Joe Biden. I'm going, okay, well,
yeah, we love him. He's awesome. He looks so safe.
At this point, today, I'll tell you, I'm not. Biden was my fifth choice.
Of course.
But today I was very happy. He tweeted out today, and this is again good. Do more of this, about time. He tweeted out, Donald Trump is the most corrupt president in modern American history, and his recovery efforts are making that clearer than ever. And I'm going, yes, you figured out how to ball up your little digits and throw a punch. About damn time.
Yep, and you know what? He is doing a very rope-a-dope-like strategy that I absolutely love because, again, it is also driving Trump up a wall. Okay, and this goes back to what me and you were talking about maybe even a month ago, like before Rona got really bad, actually. And we were talking about the primaries and ultimately how, I think because Joe was in that Obama White House, that he very much operates in this kind of Obama 3D chess way. He's a very strategic thinker, I think, in general, for him to have been as successful in government as he has been in his life. But beyond that, I do think that Joe was very confident in what he had in the base of the party. And so that's why while everybody was making fun of him, like he's not campaigning, he's not on the trail, how's he going to catch up to everybody else that's young and whippersnappers and they're all over the country? And he was just kind of quietly doing the work of making sure the coalition was strong, the Obama coalition was strong, knowing that he would be able to make this breakout finish with South Carolina and then Super Tuesday. And I think beyond that, the impetus for him even entering the presidential race in the first place, I do think that, around that time, if we think back, I mean, it seems like ages ago, but around that time, even though all the new up-and-comers and even Bernie had re-entered the race at that time, the polls were still saying, the media was still saying, is Joe Biden going to be a dark horse? They were still polling, and Joe Biden was still the one above and beyond that was getting the majority of the support in the middle, you know, like apart from all of the new people that were running. And he wasn't even in the race. And a lot of us were so annoyed because we're like, well, he's like not even on the stage. And even if he was, he would be like pretty last on our list because we're kind of moved on from that. But I do think that ultimately a lot of the moves that Trump took in terms of, you know, actually going out and reaching out to these other countries to have them dig into Joe Biden, because he had already, it's like the media message had been inserted into his head. We call that in when we talk about psychosis, we talk about something called thought insertion, where you can literally, you know, somebody who is very impressionable or suggestible or psychotic can watch TV and then they really think that message is meant directly for them and it has been inserted into their brain. And so in a lot of ways, Trump, I think, you know, that message of Biden seems to be his most formidable opponent got implanted into his brain of this is who I need to go after. This is my real enemy. And so I think that is why he took the steps he took that ultimately got him impeached. And I do think that's why Joe, in a lot of ways, was kind of benefiting from an inevitability that was there because he was the one that Trump was beating up on and going after and, you know, committing this impeachable offense about in a lot of ways.
Right.
And so Joe, I think now, is kind of just coming in and being that very calm, steady, you know, that calm, steady hand that's been there before, that looks like, you know, the Rock of Gibraltar. I mean, he's solid as a rock. And he's just calmly saying, hey, we've done this before. We need a steady hand. This is what we need to do to get out of this. We need to listen to the experts. Here are the facts. Here's what I'm going to do when I become president. And so he's putting that into our brains, right, of he could be the end of this. We could end this nightmare by just voting for him in November. That's all we have to do. Even if we're not a Democrat, even if we never have done this before, let's just do it and end this nightmare so we can stop dying, you know?
Yeah, I mean, the stop dying part, I think, is a pretty good sales pitch.
It is.
The bumper
really
sticker
is.
was vote for me. You might not die. I mean, come on.
I love it. I mean, it's so honest. And I think that a lot of times what hurts Democrats is that we do get into the wonkiness and the weeds of the policy and the details, and we want to talk about things at this, like, collegiate master's level of policy where, you know, again, the average everyday American who doesn't necessarily get into the sausage-making process and honestly just doesn't care and can't actually process all of this at the same time with everything else they have going on in life, they want to hear something simple like, you know, vote for me so we can stop dying. I mean,
Exactly.
They do want to hear that. They want to hear that everything's going to be okay and they can go back to how things were when they weren't worried about losing their job or losing their house or losing, you know, the food on their table, et cetera, or losing their life.
And not look like a wimp. I mean, you know, as I've been saying, you know, I've been hoping the Democrats will come up with a spine, learn how to ball up your little digits and throw a punch. And the line I've used over the years has always been, the Democrats not only do they not want to get into a fight, they won't even hold your coat when you're in one.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping that, now Joe, threw the first punch. I'm hoping he'll figure it out. But here's the thing, to highlight your point and where we can finish up on this is, it's about the narrative. It's about the not so much being, collegiate and all that. Today, the Trump reelection campaign has put out a new website called thetruth-over-facts.com.
Oh,
yes, the truth over facts.
Oh, Lordy.
And it says that it's going to uncover, quote, the truth behind Joe Biden's never-ending, seemingly incomprehensible statements during his third plotting campaign for president, and that they are going to use, in quotation marks, experts to explain this.
Well, Goebbels would be so proud. I mean, literally. What else can you say? I mean, this is propaganda 101. This is fascism, authoritarianism 101. This is sociopathy 101. This is what you do. You already create the narrative and the message. If this whole time, if you think about every slogan, okay, it's the opposite day. Make America great again. No, actually, we're not great right now. We're a complete disaster. America first. No, actually, it's America last. Okay, alternative facts.
Truth.
Fake news. I mean, we could do this all night.
Sure.
I mean, they're playing with our minds. They're doing a psychological warfare. And again, people kind of think that sounds hyperbolic and like an exaggeration. But again, you know, I don't say these words lightly. When I, as a mental health provider, am saying there is a psychological warfare going on, I mean that very seriously, because there is a whole media apparatus that is designed by, you know, Fox News and AM radio, et cetera, that you, Rick, are working against diligently. I mean, this is what you do every day, is to try to rebut and provide an alternative source of information and facts for these people who are literally being pounded on a daily, hourly, I mean, secondly basis with complete hogwash and malarkey. And I do think that Joe is equipped to throw those punches. You know, the fact that he even has that saying of no malarkey, he's going to really get Scranton style, and I think break it down in a very simple way so people can understand that and not get lost in the propaganda.
There you go. But make sure you check out the truthoverfacts.com so we can get to the bottom of things.
And check out TKO Joe after that, too. That's my little hashtag for him, too.
That's another one. All righty. Good stuff.
Yeah.
Propane Jen, I appreciate the time. Always great talking with you.
You too. Have a great week and be safe.
You as well, our good friend Propane Jane. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1933. That was the day President Franklin Delano Roosevelt signed the Tennessee Valley Authority Act. The act created the TVA as a federal corporation and was tasked to address the resource development of the region, one of the poorest in the nation. These included flood control and improved travel along the Tennessee River. It also meant improved forestry to address soil erosion and facilitation of agricultural production. Control of water resources required a series of dams designed to navigate the river and reduce flooding. Though Wilson Dam had been completed before the establishment of the TVA, the authority had embarked on the construction of 16 more dams. During the Depression, the TVA hired tens of thousands of workers for conservation, construction, and development. Historian Eric Loomis notes that though the TVA was one of the region's largest employers of black workers, the authority also maintained rigid lines of segregation in its workforce. He adds that though 14 AFL unions eventually worked on dam construction, the agency initially refused to recognize unions. Workers would have to wait until 1940 to sign first contracts in the anti-union South. Today, the authority is most well known for its supply of electricity to nearby communities. It is the nation's largest public power company and serves about 80,000 square miles in the southeastern United States. TVA capacity to generate electric power includes some 29 hydroelectric dams, 11 coal-fired power plants, 3 nuclear plants, and several combustion turbine installations. It also has several solar and wind installations. The authority produces more than 130 billion kilowatt hours of electricity each year. The TVA played a critical role in transforming the South by constructing infrastructure necessary for modernization and industrialization.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, you can email me, Rick at thericksmithshow.com. So, again, the drug thing today, just kind of one of those moments where, are you buying it? Are you buying the fact that Donald Trump came out and said that he's now taking the hydroxychloroquine? Do you think he really is? Is he making this up? Or is the doctor giving a placebo? Again, all's possible. all of it is possible. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on the top news of the day, our good friend and political analyst, Bob Ney. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Well, thank you, Rick.
So, did you see, evidently, Trump's been taking the hydroxychloroquine for a couple weeks now, he said.
Right, and, I guess supposedly the White House doctors did not recommend it, but he consulted with them, and he kind of stopped a little bit short of saying his physician had actually recommended the drug.
Yeah, where'd he get it then? If the physician didn't do it, where'd he get it?
Well, his physician went along with it.
Oh, okay.
He's stopping short of saying that the physician recommended doing it. It's kind of like up in the air, did he or didn't he? He stopped short of it. But basically, on another story I saw where he decided, he wanted to do it, so the physician went along with it, meaning the physician probably didn't recommend it.
I got to think that there's no way in hell the physician recommended it. Because did you see the side effects with this thing?
Right. He promoted it a couple of months ago, and he's made this comment. So, what do you think? Did he actually take it? Forget the physician recommending it or not, or whether, physician tried to stop him or, whatever happened. But, do you really think he's taking it?
Yeah, I don't know. This is one of those places where
I don't know.
I really don't. Because, when I'm reading through these side effects, and I've talked to people who have taken it, this is a drug that is really hard to get under control, from what I'm told, from people who have rheumatoid arthritis and people who have lupus. This is a really messed up drug, one that, gives you faster regular heartbeats, one that, gives you a whole bunch of paranoia kind of things, like people are watching you or controlling you, just all of this weird stuff.
Well, he may have had that before the drug, okay? Deep state.
Yeah, no, I'm with you, but,
Right.
From the people that I've talked to, who are, in their, 30s, 40s, 50s, this is a guy who's in his 70s, who, is not the picture of good health. I can't imagine that he would do well on this drug.
And if he did take it, I'm assuming he took it, I don't know, for a few days. May not, he's making the point that he took it, and he's basically okay because this is what he promoted a month and a half ago.
That may, that's possible. He took it once, and that means he's on it.
Right.
But doesn't that send really kind of a scary message now? Because as I tweeted out after he said it, my fear now is not for him. I don't care if he's hearing voices, at this point, because he's probably all ready. I'm worried about, the people that I know, my friends who are struggling with lupus and rheumatoid arthritis and other ailments, that this drug is meant to help alleviate and help them function. This will now make it harder for them to get the drugs that they need from a bunch of people who are now going, hey, I need this coverage. And I also think it'll make people more reckless when they get it.
Well, it also, yes, it might make people who, have no reason to take it, period, or symptoms or anything, but they take it and then could have side effects. Remember when they talked about, of course, zinc. Zinc's been always known to help immune systems, period. That you can get zinc and tablets, vitamins over the counter.
Sure.
But they announced that the quinine in certain seltzers, might help. And I noticed at the local Kroger that seltzer was gone off the shelves, like within a day, because that's how people react to things. So they're going to react to things that are reckless as much as they're going to react to things that are told that are okay. And that seltzer is one good example of it. When you say, well, it's got some quinine in it, and it just vanished.
Crazy. When I first heard hydroxychloroquine, immediately my mind went to OxyClean. And I'm going, I can imagine people going, oh, OxyClean, I can get that at the supermarket. Crazy, just crazy stuff. I want to get your thoughts on our Attorney General Billy Barr's statement that he doesn't believe that there's going to be any indictments or any criminal prosecution of Obama or Biden, despite Donald Trump saying that Durham and all of these folks are going to convict and put them in jail because they're the most corrupt ever. Thoughts on Barr coming out and saying that?
Sure. He added, had he just come out and said, Well, first of all, let me go to the fact that he knows that they can't be prosecuted. Number two, if he had come out and said, no, there's not going to be any prosecution or any investigation, then he added some words, 3 words, at this time. Now, he did that. He's not going to prosecute them, but he did that to throw a little bit of red meat there,
Right, to keep the base all riled up in the pants.
Yes. But the bottom line is, he knows, I know, your listeners know that nothing's going to be done with Biden or former President Obama.
Yeah, because I'll tell you, as soon as it came out, the Obamagate, immediately I'm flooded with emails of people going, see, most corrupt ever. And I'm going, don't we have enough problems at this moment? We're in the middle of a global pandemic, and you're going to start this as a major distraction from the fact that we're going to be over 90,000 people dying from a virus that, in my opinion, if you had someone at the wheel to begin with, may not have expanded this greatly. Shouldn't we be talking about that?
Well, yes, and the other thing about Barr's statement that I did find interesting was the fact where he came out and he said about he would not basically be part of using the office as a political type of tool, and we think of past things where he did, but on this one I thought that was another interesting statement because he I think knows this has no legs, and he actually wanted to make it clear that he's not going to do anything because the president came out so forcefully. Wasn't the president's statement about somebody should be in jail or something over it?
Yeah. I mean, they've been really hammering on the Obamagate thing, and it's amazing because Obama's really got free rent between his ears. I mean, it's really remarkable to me, and and I can't imagine what he was going through over the weekend as Obama was giving the commencement addresses, and got really high ratings, for giving his 7 to 10 minute speech.
Well, Lindsey Graham also sent a message. He would not investigate this. I'm sure you saw that,
yep.
and he basically sort of made a statement that you could take a lot of different ways, but the way that Lindsey Graham made the statement, Senator Graham said to the effect that, you shouldn't want this to happen. And I think for a couple of reasons. One, I wouldn't think in an election year, to be frank with you, if President Obama acquiesced and said, yeah, I'll come talk, I don't think you'd actually, if you were a Republican running the president's campaign, actually want him there talking, would you?
No, what I said when it first came up is I want him on the television. I want him 13 hours a day.
Right.
I want the news cycle to be all about him, and people seeing what a president looks like.
Right. So I don't think it would. The timing would not be too cool for the White House to have him there.
But the weird thing is this administration is doing everything they can possibly do to kind of move us in every direction. Like on Friday, they fired this inspector general guy, this Steve Linick, I guess his name is.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going, at this point, if you're fired from this administration, isn't that kind of like a gold star on your resume?
Right, and this one has some interesting legs to it. Part 2. Which is Mike Pompeo and the Saudi arms sales. And now Mike Pompeo said, well, I didn't know he was investigating me for the Saudi arms sales, and they didn't know that, he was fired within a short period before his report would be actually, drafted by him. And Pompeo, who says he didn't know, I'm going to throw this out here, Rick. If you're Secretary of State, and the Inspector General, Linick, has been doing a probe into the, quote, emergency arms sale to Saudi Arabia. For what reason, did they bypass the entire system, including Congress? And Elliot Engel, by the way, of New York, asked for this to be looked into. And you say, well, as Secretary of State, I didn't know. But let's say that you've had 8 employees of yours questioned by the Inspector General. Do you think one of the 8 might do a little wink and nod outside one day to you?
At least one.
Of course.
And it's one of those things where if you're in that position and you don't know, you should be fired for incompetence.
And Pompeo asked the president to fire Linick, and the president's formal statement on this, Rick, was that, well, he didn't know what he did, but, Pompeo said he, needed to be fired. So that was the official statement.
Yeah.
And this is the arms sales to Saudi Arabia, in which $8 billion some dollars of arms sales, which the Congress didn't want to happen, happened. And of course, it happened because they have to defend themselves from the Islamic Republic of Iran, blah, blah, blah. And we can debate Iran and Saudi Arabia all day long, but the bottom line remains, why all of a sudden you need $8 billion when you've got billions in jets and et cetera? Why did it have to be an emergency? That's a very easy thing to answer. Besides, well, it's Iran. We've got to get Iran, and this is what this is all about.
Yeah.
Because the administration, Pompeo, cannot justify the reason they want these arms sales. You go back to the John Bolton days with Donald Trump. You can go back to the history of this whole thing, canceling the Iran nuclear deal, which heightened tensions and actually did less to control Iran than ever before. The Obama-Iran nuclear deal controlled Iran. And here you sit with Pompeo in the throes of making this $8 billion emergency decision when we kind of all know that the best buddy of Jared Kushner is Mohammed bin Salman, the acting king of Saudi Arabia. We know that.
Yeah, and if you saw Trump's defense today, he was like, "Well, we just make it so hard for countries to buy guns from us. I want to make it easier." So his defense is not that not that it wasn't wrong what he did, but that we just need to sell our stuff more, and it shouldn't matter. We should be able to sell whoever we want.
Right.
Which is really kind of a scary thought.
So I think this one's got a lot of bad odor to it, and I don't know where it goes from here, but now all of a sudden it went from a person that didn't do his job correctly to a person who was investigating a very high-profile case of arms sales approved by Pompeo.
So he wasn't looking into Pompeo having him walk his dog or pick up his laundry.
Yeah, I don't believe that for a second. That if because there's de minimis use statutes, and I don't believe that for a second. But I think that this Inspector General looking into the $8 billion emergency sale, and of course, Saudi Arabia. Maybe they had to go after Khashoggi's family with these arms. It wasn't enough to kill him in Turkey. I mean, really, this is an outrageous ruler of Saudi Arabia, and I think this is what's behind it. I don't think the walking of the dog or the personal use was the reason Pompeo wanted him out.
Yeah, I think it's always the thing they distract you with, and it's always the thing that they really did. And I hope we get to the bottom of it. And I hope people go to jail, because I'm feeling that there's going to be a lot of that. And back to your point a moment ago about them really not wanting to dig up too much of Obama's past and bring him out and make him testify, is that the precedent has always been just to let the next administration go. I'm sincerely hoping that if Biden wins in November, that they really do go after this administration and they do lock some people up for some of the things that they've done. Right. I mean, at some point you might
start with this one.
Yeah, but I fear, and this is where Obama did it with all the Wall Street people. They just let them go, and we're going to move on, fresh start, clean start, all that nonsense. I'm hoping they do.
Well,
they do jump back.
Rick, the most outrageous let go was the fact of the people who stood there on the floor of the House. I was there and lied to all of us about weapons of mass destruction. And well, for the good of the country, we won't go down that path. Drag those people back and find out why they said that.
Yeah,
that's never happened.
No, and the people who outed Valerie Plame and all of that.
Right.
I was screaming about that as well. But you're again. We just need to move on, like you said.
Always for the, quote, good of the country.
Yeah, well, for the good of the country, we lock these people up so that it never happens again. Because if we're told, the punishment is, to help us not do it again, maybe we should be punishing these people so they don't do it again. And finally, over the weekend, I'm sure you, like everybody else, have been party to the whiplash of the blame game. Of it's Obama, it's Biden, it's the CDC, it's WHO, it's China. We're really ramping up tensions with China, and yet I see today that China has announced a $2 billion virus help at the WHO assembly, where they're actually filling the position that we've usually been in and helping other countries, which I think is a bad thing for us.
Yes, well, China's going to do this because, China, I think, is at fault, and
I agree.
We were at fault for slow reaction once we knew. They were at fault for slow reaction in the beginning, and there's an anti-China, deal going on. 100 countries want them investigated for this, but China is going to step in. China's very manipulative, very smart. I mean, that's one thing we've got to remember, and they'll step in where we aren't. So there's a way to go after them, but yet not let them take a lead in other ways, which is, to actually not let them control influence in the WHO. But obviously, I don't know.
Yeah, because I guess we're defunding them. Is that what's going to happen?
That's what's being talked about now that we're doing, and I agree that the head of the even Dr. Fauci in a White House meeting a few days ago said that the head of the WHO has a quote China problem, but that doesn't mean that we relinquish any of our ability to reform the WHO or make sure it goes in a good pattern. If we step out, China will step in, so they win one on us.
Yep. No, absolutely. And this is where, I agree with you. There are a lot of problems there. But bailing and saying, you're on your own is not the answer.
Right.
But here's my problem. I think what I fear happens come November is you're right. China is responsible to a large extent. Our reaction at the beginning was way too slow. I would argue months too slow. But I fear that, since, Trump is going after China and blaming them and the Republicans, and I don't know if you saw Ben Sass's ridiculous commencement speech where he blamed China. I fear that the Democrats are going to be on the, let's not be too hard on China's side, which I think is a horrible idea.
The White House is going to spend gazillions, the Trump campaign and the White House, they're going to spend gazillions of dollars to make Joe Biden look like, the premier's son of China. And I think that, I agree, a bad course to take, Biden will defend himself, but a bad course to take is for people to say, because Trump's been so harsh on China, we got to be nice to China. That's a bad course to take. There's the issue of Trump and China, what Trump will say about Biden, how Biden answers it, but there's also the issue of pushing at China to make sure they change their behavior, which is the only thing they understand, an aggressive push.
Yep.
And I think the Democratic side does not want to be on the, hey, now wait a minute, nothing's wrong with China's side. They've got to be careful on this.
I'm right there with you. The argument, if you need to make it, is we need a global approach. We need to bring in all the other countries and make this a global, not a go-it-alone approach.
Right.
But you can't be on the, China's not a problem.
Right.
Of which,
and Pennsylvania is living proof of that, because if you look at this with Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, which Trump should never have won Pennsylvania, you know that as well as anyone, never. But you know what? Hillary what was she soft on? Trade bills.
Absolutely. No, you're absolutely right. And we'll see. But Bob, I appreciate the time and the thoughts. As always, good stuff.
You too. Thank you.
Our good friend, former Congressman Bob Ney. Quick break, right back. Stick around. This is The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1972. That was the day that Maggie Kuhn stood before a group of reporters to tell them about her organization, the Gray Panthers. The idea for the group had started 2 years earlier. 65-year-old Maggie had received the unwelcome news that she was going to be forced to retire from her executive position with the United Presbyterian Church. Maggie was not ready to retire. Instead, she started to organize. This was during the era of the Vietnam War protests, and Maggie found allies with young people who also wanted to see changes in society. The original group developed to build connections between young and old. They called themselves the Consultation of Older and Younger Adults for Social Change. Later, they shifted their name to the catchier Gray Panthers. The Panthers adopted the motto, Age and Youth in Action. In 1975, the Panthers held their first national convention in Chicago. 200 Panthers attended, representing 37 states. At the convention, the Panthers adopted a platform of issues. They included issues important to seniors, such as an end to mandatory retirement, better housing for the elderly, and expansions to rent control. But the platform also included other social justice issues, including support for the Equal Rights Amendment, a call for full employment, amnesty for Vietnam draft resistors, and even, after much debate, the legalization of marijuana. In the more than 40 years since their founding, the Gray Panthers have continued to advocate for a variety of issues. One key achievement was a court victory to make Medicare regulations more understandable to seniors, and they were years ahead of the nation by supporting single-payer health care for all. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, like I said, and this is one of those things that really worries me because, Joe Biden has said in the past that China's not a problem. Not a worry. I think they really are. And I think having the wrong message on China would be a bad thing. And as Bob pointed out, there's no way Donald Trump should have won Pennsylvania. There's no way that the Republicans should have gotten the votes that they got from the union members in this state, which put Trump over the top. And it was his message on trade that won him Pennsylvania. Now, has he done anything on trade? The renegotiation of NAFTA, is that going to get him over the top? There's some good things in there. I'm not gonna say there weren't. There were some things in there that Republicans certainly did not want, but were willing to vote for because he brought it around. I'll give him credit for that. The end of the tribunals is not a bad thing. But ultimately, he hasn't helped workers in this country. And his court appointments have been horrible for working people. His deregulation and his attack on regulation has been horrible for working people. Workplaces are that much less safe. And now talking about immunity for employers if you get sick on the job, I mean, that should be the opening line to any, you're going to vote for Donald Trump? Really? The guy who wants to give employers immunity from you getting sick? If they do absolutely nothing and you end up getting sick and dying, they have immunity? That you don't even get to file a workers' comp claim? Yeah, that's what that means. So for me, if I'm one of the Democratic leaders, I'm hammering that early. I'm hammering it often. I'm really going after it because understand, our court system is decidedly on the side of let's see how much worse we can make things. In fact, it was just reported today that in Oregon, the judge there tossed out the Democratic governor, Kate Brown's stay-at-home orders. So it's days wide open. You saw the same thing happen in Wisconsin, where the judges decided, what? We're going to swing the doors wide open. North Carolina, same thing. All pushing because God incorporated, and all these were, Oregon and North Carolina were God incorporated. These big mega churches filing suit because, hey, we got to fill the pews, man. We got to get some bread in the plate. So what if a couple of them die off and a bunch of them get sick and, hammer our healthcare system? Got to get the money in the plate. And this is my problem with where we are right now. I am not an alarmist by any stretch of the imagination. I am not somebody who goes running at the sign of trouble. This is real. This is serious. We don't have a cure for this. We don't have, I'm sorry, as much as Trump throws it out there, hydroxychloroquine from everybody that I've talked to is not the answer. The answer is doing what we have to do. Stay away from each other. Stay home when you can. Don't infect others. If you're sick, most certainly stay home. Wash your hands more often. I've been washing my hands like crazy. I have washed my hands more in the last month than I probably have in the last 5 years. That and my wife makes me. So everyone should have a good conscience. Anyway, if you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast, the Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much for being here. Stay safe. And we'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.